Hey everybody, we're going to try this 9.3 lesson this way, so that way I'm controlling what's going on and what you're seeing or doing. So the goal of 9.3 is to take t-tables like this, and what you're supposed to do is solve various problems using the patterns that you see within those tables. So first of all, what I want to make sure we get across from 9.1 and 9.2 is how we make equations from these tables. So if we were sitting in our classroom right now, the first thing I would tell you is that anytime you want to make an equation, you always start with the bottom row. So in this case, the bottom row is represented by the letter W because we're talking about water in gallons that comes out of a fire hose. So I'm going to start with my variable and an equal sign. Pretty straightforward. And then up top, what I'm going to do is take the variable, which is time in minutes, that the gallons of water comes out of the fire hose, and I'm going to take the letter T and put it into the equation. So now what we have to do is we have to decide how is this chart moving from the top row to the bottom row. And for those of you that I saw in Zoom the other day, when you go from top to bottom, there's little keys you can remember. So anytime that you go up in amount, like from 1 to 150 or 2 to 300, anytime you go up, it probably means two different processes that you could use. And one of them is addition and one of them is multiplication. But remember, as you go from top to bottom, what you do for this column, you also have to do for this one, and this one. It all has to remain the same. So when you look at how do I go from 1 to 150, how do I go from 2 to 300 and so forth, what is the pattern? Well, I know it's not addition because 1 plus 149 is 150, but I know I can't do that here. So I know it's going to be multiplication. So when I look at this, how do I go from here to here? I'm going to take row T, and I'm always going to take it times 150. So that is the equation that I'm going to use as I solve patterns with this particular t-table. So a problem that you would probably see on a mid-chapter review quiz or your assignment or whatever is say, okay, so if it's coming out at this much per minute, 1 minute is 150 gallons, well, what happens if I have maybe 6 minutes pass by? So what I'm going to do is take my equation, W equals T times 150, and I know T is time and T equals 6 minutes. So what I'm going to do is take 150 times 6, multiply that out. 0 times 6 is 0, 6 times 5 is 30, and 6 times 1 plus 3 is 900. So that I know in 6 minutes how many gallons of water come out of that fire hose. 900, and as always, you guys know me, I'm a sucker for labels. The label would be gallons. So I want to make sure we understand how to form an equation and then use that equation to solve numbers that are not on this t-table. Another problem that you might see is something that looks like this. So we're talking about how much milk product can come out of a cow. So sometimes you'll have numbers that don't start off with 1 like the initial problem did. If you remember back a few months ago, we talked about unit rate. Well, it's the same thing where you have to find patterns within this table. So again, I want to make sure we understand how to build an equation. So in this case, we have time that's represented or measured in days, and it's represented by the letter X. And we have milk, which is measured in liters, that's represented by the letter Y. So to build our equation, remember we always start off with the bottom row. So I'm going to use that letter for the bottom row, Y, an equal sign, and then add the top variable, which is X. And the question is how am I going from the top row to the bottom row? So again, I look at my first box, going up in amount 2 to 50, so I know again it's probably either addition or multiplication. And remember, each row has to have the same rule to apply to get from top to bottom. So how do I go from 2 to 50? Well, I could add 48, but I know 7 times 48 is not, or 7 plus 48 is not 175. So I know I have to multiply. So how do I get from 2 to 50? I have to take 2 times 25. So put my multiplication sign in there. Some of you like the dot, some of you like the X. You can mash them. Doesn't matter either way, it'd be X times 25. So I know 7 times 25 is 175, 10 times 25 is 250, and so on. So your equation could also look like this if you do the mash thing. So again, solving problems within this. So let's say that, oh, I don't know, we have 30 days here. So let's say that we jump up to 40 days. So how much milk can one cow produce in 40 days according to this chart? So I put my number into the equation. So remember, days is represented by letter X. So what I'm going to do is take 25 times 40. So I know that 0 times 5 is 0, 0 times 2 is 0. I do the X thing. 4 times 5 is 20, and 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10. And then I add them up. 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. And I drop that 1, and what is my label for the amount of milk? According here, it's an L, which stands for liters. So I know in 40 days that one cow can produce 1,000 liters of milk. Now, another thing that you could do, which I kind of did this on purpose if we were doing a lesson in our classroom, is I left this initial column open. And again, we talked about unit rate a couple of months ago. I think I mentioned that a few minutes ago on this video, is that you can always make a unit rate if you want to. Let's say that in one day, how much milk does a cow produce? Well, in 2 days, if the cow produces 50 liters, and I know 2 times 25 is 50, I would do the same thing. 1 times 25 would be 25 liters of milk. Okay, again, all you're doing is using patterns, but again, I want to make sure you understand how to build an equation since I didn't see everybody on Zoom last week. The last one for this video is making smoothie ingredients and measuring those. We have batches of smoothies coming out, and all this table is looking for is the amount of yogurt that can go into a certain number of batches. So again, I want to make sure you understand how to build an equation. Remember that you always check your 2 letters, which in this case it's C and B. And to start off building your equation, you always use the bottom row first, so it's letter C. First step I do is C is equal sign, and then I use letter B. And the question is, when we build our equation, is how are we using the letter B? So how do I go from top row to bottom row? And again, if it goes up in amount, which in this case 3 to 9, 4 to 12, 5 to 15, and so on, I'm using either addition or multiplication. So I know 3 plus 6 is 9, but I know 4 plus 6 is not equal 12, so it's got to be multiplication. So again, how do I go from 3 to 9? Well, I know I take 3 times 3 to get 9. I take 4 times 3 to get 12, 5 times 3 to get 15, 6 times 3 to get 18. So I know this is the equation that I'm going to use. So it can look like this, it can look like that, or it could look like this. Okay, so that's how you build an equation. So again, we're using these equations or patterns within the chart or the T-table to solve problems within it. So let's say on this particular problem, we have 15 batches that we need to make. So I know 15 is represented by the letter B, so I'll rewrite my equation here to make sure it's clear for you. So it wants to know how many cups of yogurt 15 batches will require. So I'm going to take 15, and B stands for batches. So I'm going to take 15 times 3, and again, working out the problem, 15 times 3, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 down, 1 up, 1 times 3 is 3, and 3 plus 1 is 45 cups of yogurt. And there is my label for this particular t-table. And again, I left this column open if you wanted to find the unit rate. Remember, unit rate always deals with the number 1. So if I put a 1 here, I follow the equation. 1 batch is how many cups of yogurt? 1 times 3 is 3. So that is how you're doing 9.3. That is how you're doing 9.1, 9.2 when you build equations. But what worries me the most is not so much the pattern part, it's building the equation. You just need to remember first is to use variables, which in this case, because of room on my paper, you're going to use letters. So you always do bottom row letter first. So our bottom row here is letter C, and then we do an equal sign. And then we take top row, and we'd add that letter in. In this case, for this particular sheet, it's letter B. And then what's the rule going from top to bottom? In this case, it was take it times 3, and that's how we build our equation. So that is me teaching you. This is if we were sitting in our classroom. It's very pattern oriented. If you follow these rules over here on how to build equations, that's the way I would teach it to you. So please, please, please email me if you have questions. We're getting to the point where review problems are kind of coming from coronavirus time where we've been away from each other. So if you need help on review problems too, please email me, or if you want a Zoom meeting, we can do that as well. Just please remember, I'm always here to help you. Don't just kind of fly through this and say, well, I'm good. I just want to make sure that we're still pushing forward and we're still staying on top of things as far as math is concerned. So that is 9.3. I'm going to send out the video here or the assignment with this video here. Again, give me a shout if you have questions. Take care, my people.